Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this second and last day of this gathering. I hope you had a good dinner last night. Not too good? We need your brains to be focused and sharp today as well. Anyone from Bodø here? Congratulations, huh? Yeah, I'm gonna move up to Bodø tomorrow, I guess. Just want to give you a quick reminder. The toilets are the same place as yesterday, across the hall, and you'll find them. The nearest exit is there, still on my left side. In case of an emergency, just go through the windows. That's the easiest way. Today we will get to hear from a few more speakers here on stage, and you're also going to participate in a workshop, a great place to get to know each other if you haven't said hi to some of the people you sit with yet. A great place to get your opinions heard, so use that well later today. But first, let us get inspired by the man who is the research director at SINTEF Ocean and center director of SFI Exposed. Give it up for Hans Bjelland.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. We just had a gathering of 2 days too for this research center that I'm heading, which is in a different part of its lifetime. We're starting to wrap up, and I guess that's a good opportunity to give. I'll not give you any solutions, but some thoughts and some food for thoughts on what you are heading into. Because an SFI, or CRI, is a research center that is aimed at achieving innovations. And many have different opinions about how to do that. We have had our experiences. We have found some, I feel, good practices that I would like to share, but very much humble in the way that every center and every partner groups, every aims that different centers have will vary, and also the way of working will vary with it. Our research center is aimed at aquaculture. It's not irrelevant for this, for Sfi Harvest 2. First, I'll try to be quite brief in giving you a background for what we are working to, because that's relevant to what kind of solutions that we have found. And hopefully it will be relevant also to you. Yes. So you are probably well aware of current aquaculture farms. These are, I just brought an example from Aqualine, or now Scale. And Norwegian salmon farming is already a large-scale industry, very much standardized on this kind of technology, although there are now a lot of experimentation in various directions. We say that, and we work with different types of exposure along the coast. And very simplified, we tend to use this kind of illustration, showing that this current pen technology has the potential of also being used even further out, even more exposed. I'll come back to that. And then it's part of the industry move at the moment to also experiment and develop systems for both more production on land and more production in closed or semi-closed systems at sea. And then, as you are aware of, there is also a move towards novel structures, novel production systems that you can utilize even larger parts of the Norwegian and also international coasts. And our research center is aimed at both the current technologies and the current sites, as well as paving the way for for achieving safe and sustainable production in also other parts of the coast. That was a background when we started working on this SFI in 2014. We started the center in 2015, and a lot has happened since. The aquaculture industry has really moved forward. You are probably well aware of the development licenses, and also there are other licenses that has been strong incentives in technology development. We have, among our partners, we have fish farmers, we have technology providers, knowledge providers, and service providers. And a center as this provides a forum, an arena for collaboration around tasks that are too big for one or two or some participants. This is really to really achieve what we are aiming at. We need to work together. A little bit about the partners here. We have 3 of the main larger salmon farmers here, and we experience, and that might be relevant here as well, that even though they represent the different type of partner groups, they have different ambitions and different strategies when it comes to utilizing the coast and utilizing new technology. They have slightly different approaches. They have much of the same experience, but their choices might differ. Likewise, it's the same with the technology providers. They offer different types of skill sets, technologies. Some are new to aquaculture, but many are not. Some are really large-scale corporations, and some were merely startups when we started. And I have at least experienced that as a fruitful thing to give some dynamics in the collaboration. And then we have more in the engineering and certification area and service providers. We tend to see this, and I guess this isn't that different from how you have constructed Sfi Harvest 2. But I'm going to, of course, you have the education pillar. And then, but I guess what is most important for my thoughts here today is the interaction between the projects and innovations. Because innovations can be a lot of things. And how you relate that to the activities that you plan and coordinate and disseminate through the center, I think is key. How we have done it in Exposed is starting off with the 6 core research areas and then identifying, and quite dynamically identifying projects that are related to one or more of these research areas. We see that the projects tend to lean towards one major research area, but we have always struggled to maintain the cross-disciplinary work, and I think that will be key also for you, not working in silos. And then we have a lot of, I think it's very important to have a very think about how to utilize and how to provide the PhDs and the associated projects. There are lots of activities among all you partners here, and how to kind of use the force of that into the projects will also be important, I believe. We have many examples of PhDs that are not funded by the Exposed, that we have kind of taken under our wings. And at least, and my impression is that they are very grateful to have this kind of community and with a meeting place where they can meet industry partners, get relevant tasks and research questions, but also data and access to people of knowledge of the industry. Yeah, but we we have slightly changed the projects, how we organize projects also along the way, and I think not having too rigid of a structure is also important. And then, as you are here, you should never underestimate the value of network building. I think that's extremely important in this first phase of the center that you have. Get to know each other. Now I hope you utilized the opportunity last evening too. And not only, I don't know just how frequent you will have these large gatherings, but also in the projects and in other ways, look for opportunities to visit industry partners, have smaller meetings, discussing opportunities as well. Of course, we have all experienced a COVID period. What we did was to start a webinar series. Every second week we have had now, very low-key, 1 hour every second Friday, as an opportunity to talk about PhD work, talk about some industry partner perspectives, something, just to get, and I think that the synergies between getting together physically and having those more frequent meetings on web is very helpful. So that's at least something to think about. And I think what happens in such coffee breaks is extremely important to also get out of the silos and different research topics. I think the goal in such a center is to achieve something together. I've stolen this from Arne Rinnan, our previous chairman from Kongsberg. He's probably stolen it from someone else. It's not rocket science, but it's I feel it kind of describes a innovation process as well. You don't always know where you'll end up, and I think you need to acknowledge that, not having too strict of a product perspective, at least for I guess many of the industry partners might have, but for the center, more of a vision of what the industry should achieve is probably a good starting point, rather than having a very product-focused perspective. I'll get back to what kind of products, what kind of services that we have looked into. We have seen in addition to having meetings, getting people together, we see also that there is something to be aware of, that people change. Companies change, it's very dependent on the contact persons. And in the middle of the center, we realize that even though we publish research papers and memos and reports, it's not that easy for a new person to really get into what has been done and what should be done moving on. So what we did was to try to have one-pagers of research findings, innovations that has been developed and worked on, with pointers to more literature, more information in those. We might probably do it slightly differently if we had done it again, but this is still a valuable tool for us internally in the center, and it's really useful for me and others to pick out stuff to illustrate what we have been doing. So to curate the information or the knowledge gained is important. What we now see is that now when we're close to the end of the center, this is not what we will end up with, because this is very much focused on the things that we have done. But now the focus, we believe, should be turned towards what the messages should be. What is the messages to the fish farmers? What is the messages to the technology providers? And what is the kind of conclusions to the society at large? And that's slightly different from this. We also see that industry partners, it's their job to work on innovations all the time. And it's not always, and that happens in different types of interactions with the research center. And I think that's a good thing, and it's a natural thing. But it's okay to acknowledge that. During this research center, we have had, these are just a bit old examples actually, but of some innovation that has happened among the research partners. Yeah. And one way of looking at it is that, okay, we have the center activities and how we organize and what we control from the center. As I talked about, we have projects, research areas, PhDs, academic results. And then, equally important for a center and for getting together and talk, what you really need to focus on is what you are going to achieve. What is the vision of the center? And I think, I guess that is very high on the agenda in the start of the center. Just make sure that you don't lose sight of that midway, because that will probably change, and it's a good topic for discussion among the partners, I think, to always keep an eye on where you're heading. And then it's another question of how you kind of achieve that. And I think that the industry partners is key to understanding how you turn research into innovations and achieving the changes that you want. Yeah, so we worked a bit on also how to measure success. What is an innovation? The Research Council of Norway has their boxes to tick when you report such a center as well. That might not be the most important one to really achieve your extremely high ambitions, right? But still, I would say at least we have sorted that in kind of four boxes. And one is where we obviously have contributed to some parts of that innovation and where it's very easy to track. You have other examples where things have been developed but not still realized, and the TRL level might be too low. At the point, you might not have an industry partner just yet to have picked it up, but the potential there is obvious. And then you have more subtle innovations. Some might not think of those, but we have a lot of fish farmers in the center, and we see that the research and the results of the center along the way has changed their operations, which is also an innovation in itself. And then in the end, we probably have contributed in many ways that is very hard to evaluate. Just the discussions and being part of that kind of community does something to the partners. Yeah, I'm not going to take that, but I'll wrap it up. So different stakeholders. This is my last slide. I think it's also important to acknowledge that different stakeholders have different needs and opportunities. For us, fish farmers, they need to share experience with each other. Especially, they're very popular among the technology providers. I'll come to that. But they really like discussing common challenges. They need to improve their procedures, but what they ask from the center is practicable knowledge, best practices, how to do it. They're seldomly interested in research papers, except for some very particular fields, like, for example, swimming behavior and swimming capacity of salmon. They're not that interested in formulas of drag coefficients of nets or autonomic systems. That's something that they need from the technology providers to turn into innovations. And then the technology and knowledge providers, they need shoulders to stand on. And with that, I mean, that's where scientific publications and moving the state of the art is more important. They also need access to end users and having arenas to discuss ideas and solutions, and also lowering the threshold for testing, I think is very important. And sometimes, and I said that earlier, they need to be able to do stuff on their own and bring in the research center and the research activities where it fits. But I think that having an open dialogue with industry partners about just this is important. And finally, don't forget that Sfi Harvest, as Sfi Exposed, deals with the society at large. You will not achieve very much if you're not able to move the regulations, move the governance, and do it also, although you have a large consortium, you need to move together with an even larger consortium. So being aware of the societal dialogue will be important. And for Exposed and the aquaculture industry, that has been important, and we see that it will be increasingly important in the years to come as well, to provide some vision and a roadmap, input to those decisions that will be made is important. And just 2 weeks ago today, I was elected to sit in a governmental, what is the English term? NOU? A norsk offentlig utvalg that will look at the regulation of the Norwegian aquaculture industry. And of course, the knowledge gained through Exposed will be useful in that kind of. So that's to think about how you can communicate and fit your knowledge gained throughout the center into information and knowledge that is useful in those kinds of societal changes will be important also for Sfi Harvest, I'm sure. Thank you. I've used more.
Great answer. Any questions for Hans? Anyone? At all?
Jeg tror ikke jeg på.
This will be a tricky question, Hans. Looking back, is it something in the startup of Sfi Exposed you would now wish you did different?
Yeah, I'm quite good at being self-critical, but I think it's at least important to start off with getting not going into each individual corners or rooms of the research areas, but you need to, and I guess you're good ahead, you have already started that, but you need to talk together and across disciplines and across partner groups. And maybe we did it, but we would probably do it slightly different, but having some good common projects that could look across disciplines will be important, I think.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Hans. Thank you for giving us a great start on this second day. Give him a round of applause. Okay. Let's jump into the next speaker. It is time to look at some facts with Vebjørn Melle, senior researcher at Havforskningsinstituttet, the Institute of Marine Research in Norway, and coordinator of the EU project MESO. Try to make him feel like a rock star now. Vebjørn, the stage is yours.
I'm afraid I need some of this. My voice isn't too good. It's not COVID. I'm tested and vaccinated. Thank you. First of all, thank you to Ingunn for the kind invitation to come here and talk to you. I'll see how well, the pointer is here, yeah. I just continue? Yeah. The talk today, it will be slightly different from the first title. I will focus on some new methods for Mesopelagic stock estimation. How good are we, and what are the ways forward? And of course, when we are starting now exploring the Mesopelagic ecosystem, there is a lot of things we don't know. For example, who are they, and what is the ecological role of the different species and taxa down there? We know that diversity is high, but we don't always know what species of jellies and squids and fish and crustaceans that we see on the aquagrams sailing over these waste areas of the Mesopelagic community. So, for example, into the ecology, to what degree are they predators or prey, or even predators on the pelagic community? We know, and we see that, sorry, I'm trying to go back again. Yeah, we know there is a lot of vertical migration going on during the day and night, and then there is some species or groups of species that don't migrate, and who are they and why don't they migrate? And of course, these days there is a lot of investigations when it comes to the carbon sequestration. And in MESO, which is the EU project that I'm in, and we are also looking into that. So, then to the focus of this talk, new technologies and methods for abundance and biomass estimation. And I will talk about trawls, I will talk about submersible acoustics, and perhaps a little bit on optics. First to the trawls. Traditionally, the Mesopelagic community, which is consisting of macroplankton and micronecton, we have been sampling these with either small plankton nets or we have been using these huge commercial trawls. And these groups, they kind of fall between these two sets of gears. And when it comes to the plankton nets, they are small and slow. So we know there is a lot of avoidance. The commercial trawls, which probably Grimaldo talked a little bit about, even though his trawls are different to most of those. The commercial trawls, traditionally, they are graded. You have big meshes in front, and then gradually they are smaller towards the current. And the problem with this is that the herding of the organisms, which is related to size, species, light, it can be internal motivation, will be guided by or related to the mesh size. Also, extrusion of smaller organisms through these trawls, it's a huge problem. We don't know at what exact mesh size that's happening. So in a combination, the effective mouth opening of such a trawl will be unknown. So therefore, we started the development of the non-graded trawls, and we started already in the late 1990s, in fact. So it's a long-going work. Just a few things about the non-graded trawls. the trawls we are designing, they have the same mesh size from the mouth opening to the end. We tried not to have wings on the trawls, or at least the wings should not have a outward pointing angle. And it's also so that the mouth opening, or the area of the mouth opening, should be less than the sum of the mesh openings. So that is in fact what is deciding the length of the trawl. And here's a drawing of such a trawl. We have many, as you will see. So the initial design was, and I just named the trawls by the circumference of the opening. And the first trawl was this 46-meter frontal circumference trawl, and it had 4 panels with 4-meter width of the panel in front. And we have the same mesh size of 3 × 3 millimeter light opening. I will just mention the light opening, which is the actual opening of the meshes. And it had a total length of about 49 meters. And when we started to use this trawl many years ago, we compared it, of course, to the Mach Ness and the okra trawl. I'll mention a little bit about that because, well, we saw that this trawl, it did catch larger organisms than the Mach Ness. And we could compare it to the Mach Ness because we had more or less the catch volume of both. We also saw that there was extrusion of small organisms compared to the Mach Ness. But we couldn't really compare this trawl to the okra trawl because we didn't know the catch volume of the okra trawl for different organisms and different length of organisms. So we thought this was a promising design, but the sample actually was still small, even though we had 36-meter theoretical opening. And therefore we went gradually to bigger trawls. The design was weak, so we covered it with the outer cover panel, and there was still an open question: did we have avoidance of the larger specimens? And that was really hard to know unless we know exactly what larger specimens are there and in what concentration. So from that, we went through a long development. Here's the first trawl. We increased the mouth opening, and the next trawl was this macroplankton trawl with the 92-meter circumference. And actually, that is also the standard trawl now at the IMR surveys, ecosystem surveys. This trawl was about 50 meters long, had the same mesh size. And then the next trawl, which is the 134-meter opening trawl. That's just the circumference, it's not the area. It was 95 meters long, but then we had started to look at the possible use of multiple cordons to get vertical distribution and also camera systems at the cordon. And therefore we introduced these flapping panels. I'll come back to that. So probably Eduardo talked about that also, but that actually, at least for us, it came from the krill fisheries in the Antarctic. So we introduced that, and that we have now on the other trawls also. When we wanted to increase the size even more, we also had to open up the meshes. So the two biggest trawls we have been testing have a 7 by 7 millimeter mesh size. And that was done because otherwise the trawl would be enormously long and we couldn't really tow it. Yeah. This is just a picture of the trawls. I think the only new thing here is the area. The first trawl, well, not the first trawl, the second trawl is 34 meters square meter opening, then 79, 345, and the biggest one that we have left now had a 792 square meter opening. I'll come back to how that's measured. This is just a picture of or a drawing of a trawl with these flapping panels. Here is 10, and they are attached in the front and loose in the back, and therefore they can move and transport stuff down. At least that's the theory. I'm not sure it really works very well, but that's another. Then to compare trawls and also to get the density and the biomass in the sea to be able to estimate stock size from trawls, you need to know the catch volume. Unless you have the catch volume, you are actually lost. You can't compare the trawls, you can't really work with the data. And therefore, we introduced the method to measure the volume. And what we did, we used these standard Scanmar spread sensors to measure the width of the trawl. We put that sensor on the foot rope and one on the head rope. And the difference here is, of course, the height of the trawl. And then we were able, by the ellipse, to calculate the mouth area opening. And this is changing with the towing speed and the depth and everything. But we measure it continuously, so we can always know the opening. And then we use a simple ADCP to measure the flow into the trawl, and opening times the flow is the volume. So we calculate that for all the depths. And usually we do the V-hole, so then we calculate volume from the start down to the bottom of the hole and up again. I think here we just focus on the lower part, two figures there. One is for the 134 trawl, and the other figure is for the 280 with bigger meshes. And here we have compared the in situ volume that we measure, the area that we measure times the flow with the ADCP. And this is compared to the measured area, but with the towing distance. And you see, and the stipple line is 1-to-1. And you see that the area we are measuring with the flow meter is very close to the travel distance of the trawl through the water. So I think at least this is an indication that we don't have very much what they call a bucket effect in the trawl. That is that the flow is stopped due to the clogging of the meshes or things like that. There is you see the data is not falling straight on a line, but we have not compensated here for towing against and with the current. So I think we can improve this. We have data showing also the flow outside the trawl. So again, not to spend too much time here now, just focus on the first two parts of this figure. And the upper panel shows the catch, and now you see that we have the density, like individuals per meter square, or meters cube. And this is for the 92-meter trawl. It's 6 by 6, but it's the 92-meter trawl, and the catch below is by the 280 trawl, which has coarser meshes. And you see that the fine mesh trawl, the smaller one, it catches very well the smaller or the 1-year-olds, while they are lost partly, at least, in the trawl with the coarser meshes. So there we lose something. But this is not compensated, but the bigger trawl is catching more of the older and larger fish, which is partly lost there. You see, we don't get really a good length distribution of the 2-year-olds, or 3, whatever. So this shows two things. We are losing things here, and we are losing smaller stuff here. And it also shows that it's very hard to catch a full size and age distribution of one species with one gear. And when you have all the other species in the ecosystem, it's really a challenge trying to be able to construct a gear that get it all. I drop this and this. Then turning to the I will turn to the acoustics and estimating abundance and biomass by acoustics. I think it's a very promising technique, but it's also very difficult. Some of the problems with the acoustic is that the mesopelagic organisms, they are small and they live deep in the ocean. The mesopelagic communities, they are characterized by a high diversity, many species. For example, the fish, some of them have swim bladders, others don't. Some fish, they start with a swim bladder, and then as they grow older, they fill the swim bladder with fat. And of course, this is inflicting on the acoustic estimates very much. So the depths of the mesopelagics, they are not very reachable by the high frequencies due to absorption. So taking advantage of these new techniques like multi-frequency and also wideband techniques is hard. And of course, there will be a limited use of hull-mounted acoustics in the mesopelagics. And therefore, we have focused on the submersible acoustics as a possible solution, and we are not the only ones, of course. And to do this, we had this towed platform that we call Meso built. It's not a beauty, but it's very practical. We can attach almost anything to it, and we have built it ourselves, so we can more or less do whatever we want, like to it. So on this we have Simrad EK80 with 3870, 120, 200, and 333 kilohertz transducers, which is more or less the same as we have on the ship, unless the 18, which is huge. Then we have a multi-net with 5 nets that we can release when we like, and we can take samples of what we see, possibly not on the acoustics, but at least on the optics, like the optical plankton counter and the 2 video plankton recorders that we have. And also we have a CTD with a fluorometer, and we have a couple of light sensors. And the towing speed here is usually at 45 knots, and there is a depth range of about 1,500 meters of this. I'll show you some of the results. Yeah, this is just a listing of what we are doing, and I'll come back to that since I go through them all. The first is to use TS measured at depth with, for example, Messer or whatever you have, as a help in the analysis of hull-mounted acoustics. And for example, here we have measured the TS over depth with the different frequencies of acoustics, and here you see the TS distributions by depth, and of course that can help in getting the abundance from the acoustics. Of course, the problem here is that you can with measure the TS at 200 kilohertz at 1,000 meter, but from the hull-mounted acoustics, with 200 you get perhaps to 100 or 200 meters. So, yeah, so that's the problem with that. Then another study, we again we have the 1,000 meter hole with the measure, and then we use the in situ wideband acoustic data for scatter identification. So we did just a cluster analysis of the data, and we sorted the data into 7 groups, and that's based on the signatures, the wideband signatures that you see here. This is the TS over the frequency range that we have. That could be others, and then we can plot actually these groups against depth, for example. This is day and this is night, I think, and then we can see the depth distribution of the groups. Of course, we don't know what they are, so then we needed trolls to get into these layers and try to identify it, which is not a trivial task, but anyway, it can be done. So Yeah. Then the next one is direct estimates of mesopelagic abundance based on echo counts from the submerged acoustics. As you can see easily from this plot, from it's about 700 meter. It's absolutely possible to just count the echoes, and that's an attractive method because then you get directly to densities as long as you know the volume of the beam. So we have done that, and here you see plots for different frequencies of counts, actually, and densities against depth. And that is also a very attractive method because you get to abundance directly. But of course, again, you need to identify the echoes if you are going to go into what these things really are. And then we have also used the in situ TS estimation in the parameterization of models, acoustic models, and we have a couple of publications on that, and that's really moving forward now, and there is another publication coming on that soon, we hope. And finally, when it goes to the acoustics, I would like to point to this method, which we think is very promising, because here we have used the in situ TS spectra and models to estimate the mass or the weight of individual gas-bearing organism or fish at the depth they are staying. And the example organisms that we have here is cyclotony. It's a very abundant species. And it, at least in the area that we were, they set between 400 and 800 meters, and they don't migrate. And they have a swim bladder, of course. So what we did, we fitted the acoustic models to the TS spectra that we observed at depth with the measure. And this gave us the swim bladder volume at the resident depth, at the peak of resonance. And then we assumed, and I think this is kind of the new in this method, we assumed that the fish at the depth was neutrally buoyant. And from that we could also estimate the individual mass or the weight of the organisms. And we did that. We compared the acoustics and the net caught biomass distributions, and in total they were quite similar. So this is quite promising, and we also suggest that, in fact, this method can be used for other species. So that means that you, with acoustics more or less alone, can get the way forward in the estimating single specimen weight. Yes, I'm finished now, so sorry. Yeah, I think that was the last slide I planned to show. Okay, thank you.
Great, Vebjørn, great. Any questions for Vebjørn? Yes, Eduardo, this is your field.
I would like to see the next slide. But that was my question.
That was your question.
We got to do what we got to do.
Yeah, you want to? I can show it. It's not a secret. Yeah, this is of course the fishery of Mauricus in the Norwegian Trench, Norway. The Norwegian Trench is going in here. They were fishing on the west side, and that was done by the Lee Group. And this is the successful year in 2019. The unsuccessful years I haven't shown. And then this was done, the fishery, the reason I wanted to show this, the fishery happened in July, I think, mostly, in the summer in 2019. Then we went back with our vessel in March 2020, so that's more than half a year later, and we tried to estimate the kind of a standing stock along the western part of the Norwegian Trench, and we estimated that at 15,000 tons. That was a combined acoustic troll survey, traditional fishery survey. And we are able to do that with Maurolicus. But Maurolicus, this is, sorry, I didn't say that. This is Maurolicus. It's Laksesild in Norwegian, pearlside in English. But this fish is called a Mesopelagic fish, but actually it's standing between 150 and 200 meter. So it's on, actually, probably not the real Mesopelagic fish. So for such a species, you can use hull-mounted acoustics under the troll survey, and it works fine. Yeah.
Can I ask another question?
Oh, yes, of course.
There have been 3 other cruises along the Irminger, and also 2 other cruises along the Norwegian coast in 2000. Could you please say what were the results of those cruises?
Sorry, better.
The cruises on board along the Irminger and along the west coast.
Yeah. You want to hear about the cruises, or?
Yes,
Yeah.
if the results, if you found fish.
Oh yeah,
those
if we found
cruises.
fish, yeah. Yes, we did. We haven't really analyzed the data when it comes to abundances. The thing is that when we do the cruises, we have had many cruises. From Cape Verde to Norway, we have had 2 in the Iceland basin south of Iceland. The last one we also enter into the Irminger Sea. Usually on these cruises, we don't scrutinize the acoustics from the hull-mounted transducers, and the reason for that is that it takes a lot of time, and we are quite clear that it doesn't really give us much information. I can't, for example, show you. I could probably for the Cape Verde cruise, but for the other cruises, I can't show some kind of consistent acoustic distribution. But there are south of Iceland and in the Irminger Sea, sure, there are very strong layers, but they are also deep, many of them, and yeah, I think, at least from our side, it seems like there are concentrations along the shelves. When you get into the open ocean, it's there is the layers are thick and contains a lot of biomass. But of course, when you get into the open ocean, also the concentration will be lower. So they are not so concentrated. Yeah.
Any more questions, Eduardo? No? Good. And if you have any questions for Vebjørn, you can ask them in the coffee break or in the lunch, right? Yeah? Yep. Thank you, Vebjørn. Okay. Moving on. Or are we? Yeah, we are. Great. We have one more presentation before a short coffee break. The man who is coming up on stage this time holds a PhD within fish physiology from NTNU Sintef. He is now working as director of aquaculture at Sjømat Norge, Norwegian Seafood Federation. And I have heard people say his name with admiration, so I'll look forward to this presentation, no pressure. Please welcome Jon Arne Grøttum.
Thank you. I really feel the pressure, especially because I'm talking about the biomarine raw materials, which I'm not an expert on. And looking at you, you are a room full of experts on this topic, so it's I'm a bit humble. But hopefully we can have a more political approach to this. And first of all, I would say that within Sjømat Norge, we work with biomarine raw material in different approach, but because I'm working with aquaculture, my approach to this topic is related to the need for the fish feed in the future. And I'm very happy to be invited, even if I don't know much about it. And the reason is because this is so important for the industry. It's really important. And we have, for several years now, tried to put it on the agenda. And we see now that we have succeeded. And yesterday I was in our first meeting with the new Minister of Fisheries. And one of the topics that is stressed is very important is access to the feed, new feed resources for the aquaculture. So you guys are very important for the further development of the aquaculture. Just start a few words about Sjømat Norge. We are the main seafood organization in Norway. I think last week or 2 weeks ago, we passed 800 members, meaning 800 companies that have 16,000 employees. And you see we cover most of the whole value chain within the seafood sector, except for the fishery sector itself. And within the aquaculture, we have the whole value chain, including also the technical service part and also the people working with fish health and environment. And what are we working with? I mean, it's to promote the legislation and industrial policies that is mentioned here. I mean, we work to try to improve the framework and the possibility to develop the industry. We have worked a lot about the export and internationalization. We are an export industry, so we need access to the different markets. But we're also advising the industry on different topics and what we do in a close cooperation with the research institutes, of course. And because we are an employee organization, we also take part of the collective bargaining. So shortly, we try to facilitate the responsibility, profitability, and the further development of the industry. And to start with some self-critics of Sjømat Norge. So I think we have a history where we have working very much with the daily problems, challenges within the industry. We have not been so very good to have a more approach to look in the future, how the industry should develop, but we have tried to change that and make more strategy. What has to be done to put this industry or make it that it can take a position in the future. And I think there are two topics that is extremely important. I'm sure that it's mentioned several times, but I mean sustainability. If you look at and hear the discussion going on, sustainability become more and more important, especially the last 2 years. This awareness of sustainability have increased a lot. We see it national, but also international with the Green Deal from the EU. We see that the financial institution with the taxonomy. So we really have to focus how we should solve the sustainability. Of course, the environmental part is important, but also the economical and all the three aspects. But we also see that we really want to develop the industry because we think this is a very good way to produce the food. And to be able to do that, we have to ensure that we have access to limited resources. Sea areas is a very big topic. You heard Hans that we want to go more offshore to make use of new areas. Very important. And also the last year, we see there is also an increased focus of energy, electricity. We see that may be a limiting factor in the close future. And also as an industry that we are on the outskirts of Norway, we need to have a distribution of the energy to our companies. Human resources, of course, very important. And last, not least, the feed resources. And this is so important to ensure that we have a social acceptance for what you're doing within the aquaculture sector. That's necessary to have to develop the framework and have the politician with us, so we have the right regulation and legislation, so we can run our business in a profitable way. And we must not forget that we also are in a competition with other producers of protein. We often forget that we think we are so good, but there is really hard competition with other producers. So we have to take care of the competitiveness of the industry. To be able to look in the future, we had the work started in 1917, and in 1918 we came out with this Sjømat 2030, where we tried to put up a strategy how the industry should develop. And at the same time, we was writing this report. Also, UN launched their Sustainable Development Goals, so it was very natural for us to connect our goals to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we was quite early to make these connections. I mean, today everyone does it, of course. And we also have tried to ask ourselves, how will the industry look like in the 2030? And as I said, see what development have to be foreseen to be able to meet the challenges that we will see in 2030. And of course, one of the key factors is to develop new feed resources. I think that is essential if you will able to double, triple the production, of course. And this is related to the sustainability, the environmental impact, but of course we need the resources to feed the fish, is obvious. And I'm sure that this is probably mentioned earlier, but it's so important because the main environmental impact from the industry is, or the main focus on the environment is the greenhouse gas emissions. And we're talking about, we see that there are a lot of misunderstanding. People think that the transport is the main contribution to the gas emission from the industry, but what you see, I mean, the orange part is from on the feed production. So it's so important. I mean, the aquaculture industry is a winner in the context of gas emission, but we still have to improve and get even better. So also in environmental aspect, we need to do something with the feed. But you also see that, I mean, the big question related to sustainability and the development of the world is that we need the access to the feed. And traditionally, we have used herring, mackerel as a feed resources. And we see now, and that's very good, there's a development where more and more of that earlier was a raw material for the feed can be used directly for human consumption. So we lose some of the traditional resources. Of course, some of these raw materials cannot be used directly to human consumption, and by those, salmon is a very good alternative because it's used these resources so efficient compared to mammals. And of course, we also see that there are new materials that not even can be given directly to salmon, by given to new organisms, then again can be used to fish feed, and then to human consumption. As I said, salmon exploit the feed resources in a very efficient way. And I have some slides here. It's from 2012. I was preparing this presentation. I found those again. I think they are very good. It's from Ingvar Olsen. They're a bit old, but they illustrate very well one of the main dilemma regarding the exploitation of the resources within agriculture, where the resources that we have been used is on very high trophical levels. I mean, compared to the agriculture sectors. So we need to go down on a lower trophical level. And that effect has happened, I mean, back in the 1980s, where all the resources for feed was from fish meal and fish oil, from directly marine resources. We was criticized for that, and then as I said, this slide is from 2012, 50% is from the agricultural sectors. Now there is also discussion that we use soya as a feed resource. And I think also in this 2030 approach, we want to go back more and more away from the agriculture, and we want to produce more of the feed ingredients in the sea. As you see, no, I'm standing in the way, but I think Ingvar would use different resources here for 2030, but that shows that we have learned something on the way. From Sjømat Norge's point of view, we have one main barriers for the development of the commercialization and production of fish feed. Because if you see the process from when you have an idea, you have the application to the research fund, and you run the research fund, you are here, and maybe you are able to run small-scale testing, but really the upscaling to commercial products, I think that is one of the main challenge to commercialize this. And of course, this is related that you need the capital quite a lot, and this is also related to high risk. Within Sjømat Norge, we have discussed this, and we have tried to look at different solutions, how we can cope with both the capital requirement and risk. And of course, one solution could be that we use the development licenses that we have used for technology, also for this development. For example, that the producer of feed resources with the feed producer and the producers go together and got the license, which represent a high value and commercial possibility, and by that reduce the risk. But so far we haven't found a very good solution for this. But I think we have to put more focus how we should able to upscale the production and make these commercial products available. Of course, there are examples where this is done, but there are other resources that need to be lifted up on that level. One of the things that we did as a part of the 2030 work was that we took the initiative to this råvareløftet. I know that was presented yesterday, so this is probably a repetition from what's said yesterday, but what we saw it's necessary to develop this knowledge base so we can make the right decisions. We need a commitment among the decision makers, and that's about the industrialization of the products. And what we have worked quite a lot with is to engage the authorities and the administration. I think a lot of the work done against the politicians and also the government is the result what we saw yesterday, that there is an awareness now in the government that this is a very important topics. And then enable production and commercial availability that I also already mentioned. Related to this knowledge base, I think I really like this work from SINTEF. From us, this has been a great help, where they went through these 23 different possible sources and put them in a concept where they evaluate the potential for production of protein and fat, the cost of the production, the industrial status, global position, and the sustainability. And to have this overview and see what resources that we should have focus on is very important for us as an organization, and to have a good strategy how we should develop this further. I think I skipped this one. And then I summarize. As I said, new marine ingredients is so important for the industry, both because we need the increase to the access to the feed resources. That's a necessity to be able to produce the fish, is obvious. This is important regarding to reduce our environmental impact. And we also see that it represents a great possibility for the industry, both as added value and employment along the coast. Thank you.
Questions for Jon Arne? I'll give you the mic. How about that slide from 2012? That was a great one. The best slide of these 2 days. Here you go.
Yeah, Einar Nilsen from PGS. A question on, you say that everybody needs access to new feed. and we have been listening to how long it's taken to develop equipment here, and number of years, and we see that there has been given access for fishing for Kalanus, for example, and they are partly done. So my interest is, why doesn't the industry that needs this food spend money? How much money are they spending in helping to develop this one? Because clearly it's a miss here on the available capital to do this type of more continuous research and picking up the sort of taking the ball and playing with it, and it's very hard to see how this is gonna accelerate without somebody with a lot of money, which your industry actually have, is putting in something.
I think that's a very good question, and you say, as you said, the producers earn money, and the money and capital is there. But what I also say is a great risk involved in this investment. I think that's one of the answer to the question. And I also think the second one is that, like the salmon producer, want to have a focus on salmon production. I mean, we have example that they also produce the feed, but usually distinguish the production of salmon. You have the feed producers, and then you have the producer of the ingredients. So you really have focus on your main activity. I think that's one of the questions. But I think your question is also very important, and that's why I stress this, that I think we need to look at solution, how we can make available this money for this risk investment. And I think the comparison with what Hans talked about earlier today, what we have seen within the technology. I mean, the industry had the money, but they didn't want to invest it in new technology to go offshore. But through the development licenses, you got risk capital that make that possible. And now we see, in fact, some of the companies want to do that investment directly without this help from the development licenses. So I think we need a system a bit similar what is done for technology, also for the feed resources.
Anyone else? Yes.
Hello. At the end of the day, everything is about environmental footprint. And the more we use terrestrial food in aquaculture, the more we take the environmental footprint of that food production, soya, for example, into the sea. And that is one thing for the entire balance of the industry and the future of the world. But there is also another, let's say, more image problem, that if sjömat, also the food of the sea food production, is an agricultural activity, which is, by the way, also subsidized by taxpayers' money and like that, then we have, so to say, we move the stable into the ocean, and that is not very often, at least not in Norway, what people consider seafood.
I so much agree, and I know there's one from the NGO environment, the Country Protectant. I have to be a bit careful what I say, but I think when you focus on the environmental impact from the aquaculture, it's a very narrow discussion. And I'm a bit disappointed from the environmental group that not are able to take the context that you do, put the question in a more global, holistic view, and see what the aquaculture do. It's so important for the global environment. Exactly, because the alternative for production in the sea is that we produce the food on land, where there's very little area left. We have the water question, etc. So I think, and that's also what we try to do with this 2030 report, to try to take this holistic view. So we said something that we have to have a global approach, but we have to think locally. So So what you say is very important. I thought that was maybe mentioned earlier, so I didn't bring that into my presentation, but I think that's essential.
Yeah. One in the back. I'm coming.
Hi, I'm Elina, working in Sintef Aquaculture. I just wanted to comment on this high risk, high capital intensive new industries. And I think there's actually one or maybe more in this room that's actually done something about it, and it's Gunvor, who said, this is not an industry, let us create one, and started a spin-off company. Which I think it's absolutely awesome. And since it's so research-based, high risk, I think that might be one way to address it, to be able to spin out more new feed companies. So that was my comment.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you mean that Sintef will start to create companies producing fish feed, or...
We believe that all high-risk cases that come from research need to be spun out from research institutes. So I think Sintef and many others do have a responsibility to look into that, because otherwise a spin-out is the format where that can attract high-risk capital. And I think you should probably look into seafood and that story and be inspired by it. At least I am deeply. And as well as taking on other forms of initiatives. But yes, I think that research institutes are really can do something about this.
I think commercialization should be done by the industry. And there are some examples that that's the best solution, but of course in cooperation with the research institute where you have the knowledge. And seafood is a very good example, but I think for the feed resources, you need to think big. I mean, if Skretting will buy these resources, they have to look at the cost. And to have a comparable cost of the production of these feed resources, you need to think big, you need a lot of capital, and you need a professionalization of how to run this business. So yes, in cooperation with research institute, but the research institute shouldn't run the business. And I don't think you say that either, but...
No, I actually said that.
Okay, sorry.
So
sorry.
that's okay. I think we agree on disagreeing.
Yeah.
I think we should probably go both ways, just to speed up development.
Okay.
We can call Alexandra Becker during the break and hear if she would like to help you out with that. But great comments, great questions. Any more? More from you, Jon Arne? You done?
No, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And keep up your good work. The next from us is this. Coffee and tea break. You know where to find snacks, coffee and tea. And it says be back at 10. We can do 10:05, I think. Yeah. See you then. All right. Ladies and gentlemen in the hall, if you care to join us, please. On their way, great. And the last part of the group are crossing the finish line there. Great. All right, we have 2 more speakers. And then there's time for some workshop afterwards. Hope you all enjoyed your break. A short break, but break anyhow. And that you're ready for more presentations. The next one out holds a PhD in Public Policy and Management from the University of Washington and a Master of Science in Natural Resources and Environment from the University of Michigan. She is based at the NTNU and has a current position as an Andre Hoffman Fellow with NTNU, the World Economic Forum's Ocean Action Agenda, and C4IR, that was right, wasn't it? Ocean and Sfi Harvest. Please welcome Dr. Kate Crossman.
Perfect, thank you. Hi. So I'm so pleased to be here and be able to speak with you today. I'm especially pleased because many of the talks that we already had this morning are so relevant to what I'm going to be talking about. I've just started my fellowship, so what I'm going to do is present an overview of the research system, or so the system that we're looking at in the research, as well as how this will apply in the context of Sfi Harvest. So I study decision-making. And that can be decision-making in government. It could be decision-making in terms of adopting a piece of legislation. It could be decision-making in terms of implementing a piece of legislation. It could be decision-making by private sector actors like companies. And when we're making decisions about the ocean, specifically, we have a lot of questions that we need answers for when we're making these decisions. And these could be things like the sustainability of novel fisheries. They could be things about the environmental footprint of marine industry. And underneath all of these questions is a larger question of trust. Can we trust that the information that we're using and the decisions that we make based on that information will actually achieve the outcomes that we want and avoid the outcomes that we don't want? And in order to answer those kinds of questions, for instance, the fisheries sustainability question, we need a lot of information. We need information about the ecology of the system where the fishery is taking place. We need information about the economic sustainability of the fishery, and we need information about society and societal attitudes towards the fishery. So my fellowship focuses on trust in big data, and we can use big data to answer, or to start to answer some of these questions that we care about. What do I mean when I say big data? Well, you all know, even if you don't know necessarily that that's what we're calling it, you know what it is because you've already heard it spoken about multiple times in the last 2 days. Big data are data that are not tractable to traditional statistical analysis because there's too much of it. It's coming at us too quickly from a huge variety of platforms and a huge variety of formats. So for instance, trawl data plus ecosounder data plus visuals of video and photos of a lower trophic level species of interest for a fishery. And because the data, there's so much of it, and it's coming at us so quickly, and it is so varied in the platforms and formats, we have questions about the extent to which it accurately reflects the realities that we're interested in the field. So why should we care about big data and trust in big data? Well, we should care because it's already happening. It's all around us. If you love it, if you hate it, it doesn't matter because it's happening. And it has huge potential and it comes with huge potential challenges. So if it's already happening, we should try to get it right. Very often when I speak to people from fields other than my own, they come with an assumption that in my field, we call the technocratic ideal. The technocratic ideal is this idea that we get more data, we get better decisions. Easy. In my field, we know that this is actually not at all how it usually works. And I'm sure you all know from your applied experience that this is also not at all how it usually works. this assumption is based in some misconceptions. For instance, that both data and decisions are value neutral, that there is a single right decision. It ignores broader realities, like, does society want us to do this thing at all? And it ignores, importantly, all the intermediate steps between data and decision making. So this is already a huge oversimplification of those intermediate steps, but you can see that it's also much more complicated than data decisions. So what are these intermediate steps in what we call the information value chain? Well, even before we collect the data, we have to decide what question we want to answer. Are we answering the question of, will this fishery be sustainable ecologically? Are we answering the question of whether it will be economically sustainable? Or are we answering both of those questions plus the social sustainability question? We then have to select the measures. What exactly do we mean by environmentally sustainable? And what are the data points that we need to get to be able to evaluate that? Then we need to go out and collect the data in all of our amazing technologically rich ways that we now have available to us with big data. Then we need to process and analyze the data. Then we need to interpret the information and create knowledge, and then the knowledge can inform decision making, and then the decisions can be implemented, and then we get outcomes. We've probably changed the world, so the outcomes take us back to the beginning, and we have new data. So again, it's much more complicated than this idea of data decisions. And one of the key things that we need to think about is underlying this assumption of data to decisions is a neglect of study of trust and trustworthiness. If we assume that data automatically leads to good decisions, we're assuming that the data are trustworthy, so that they are accurate reflections of reality, and that the people involved in decision making are going to trust the data. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit more depth. So by trustworthiness, I mean trustworthiness as a characteristic of the data themselves. So this is potentially problematic where we have operationalized our measures poorly, so we've chosen the wrong way to measure the thing that we care about. We could have inaccurate data, particularly with big data. It comes at us so quickly and so constantly that there can be a huge time lag in our ability to analyze it. So it may already be outdated by the time we're using it for decision making, as an example. We can have chosen biased processing techniques. Very often, when we rely on machine learning, we build our own biases into the algorithms that we use to evaluate the data. Or we could have done everything right, and there's a human error factor. We interpret the information incorrectly, and we come to incorrect conclusions. In addition to issues with the data, there are issues among stakeholders, among the people who need to trust the data to act upon it. So of course, if we know there are issues with the data, that will impact our trust. And by trust, of course, I mean the psychological state of being willing to accept vulnerability based on my assessment of your intentions and your behavior and your competence. And of course, your competence includes the quality of your data. I can think that you're asking the wrong question. You can be asking about environmental sustainability, and I think we need to be talking about economic sustainability. I'm not going to trust what you're doing. We can have biased, or I can believe that your measures are biased or incomplete. I can say, I don't understand what you did in that black box of machine learning algorithms, and you can't explain it to me, so I don't trust what comes out the other end because I don't get what happened. You can tell me, I know there's no fish because my model tells me so, and I can say, well, I'm out on the water every day, and I see loads of fish, so I don't trust what you're saying. I can say, you're being unduly influenced by powerful interests and I'm just a small actor. Of course, if you make a decision and then it's unimplemented or imperfectly implemented, which is so often the case, this may create barriers to trust. And of course, the way also that I experience the outcomes. In addition to this, we're not just talking about me, we're talking about stakeholders. And you all know what I mean when I say stakeholders, because you all are stakeholders in this system of lower trophic level fisheries. There are also stakeholders who are not represented in this room currently. Stakeholders vary. Not only do they vary between types of stakeholders, within a certain group of stakeholders, there's differences, right? We can't say that, oh, all commercial fishers care about this, because that's just not true. So people vary in their baseline inclinations to trust. Some people are just more trusting than other people. They vary in their past experience with decision making. They vary in how they perceive the risks and benefits of decisions. If I'm a cod fisher, I'm worried about Calanus fisheries, and I don't think that there's a huge gain there necessarily. If I'm a Calanus fisher or someone looking to create feed for my salmon farm, I think, oh, big benefits, little risk, I don't see a problem. Of course, stakeholders vary in their knowledge and their power and their interests and values as well. But there's more. Not only do stakeholders vary, and are there all these potential barriers to trustworthiness and trust along the data value chain, the way that we talk about information matters. So this graphic is I'm American, in case you haven't guessed. This is a perfect example from the US of a scandalous thing that I'm sure you all know about, which is that people in the United States who identify as politically conservative tend to resist policy that is designed to address climate change. So what you see here, liberal, moderate, conservative, across these three experimental conditions, this was an experiment where information was shared about a potential plan to subsidize irrigation, and it was framed alternately as irrigation subsidies to help farmers better manage water, irrigation subsidies to help farmers better manage water and adapt to climate change, or help manage water and mitigate climate change. And you can see, for our conservative respondents here, mentioning climate change makes policy support go down. That's it, same policy. You say climate change, actually in this case I think it was global warming, and interestingly that does matter. But nonetheless, mention climate change and it goes down. So narratives matter, framing matter, who is talking to who matters. And process and participation of collecting data, applying data, using data also matters. So why should we care? Why does this matter? Well, I hope that it's self-evident, but in case it's not, data are inputted throughout the information value chain, and we transform data throughout the information value chain. And there are these potential barriers to trustworthiness or issues with trustworthiness of data. Stakeholders interact with data and decisions throughout the information value chain, and they vary, and where they interact with data and decision-making varies, and their interests, et cetera, vary. So they will encounter all of these different barriers to trust, and we have these other confounding factors that we need to consider. Why does it really matter? Well, because these barriers to trust are going to impact our ability to make good decisions, either because we don't trust when we should, or because we trust when we shouldn't. Oh, that's my last slide. I thought there was one more. So that's it. Thank you so much for your attention. Oh no, sorry, they got mixed. I knew there was one more. So what does this mean in the context of Sfi Harvest? There's a missing slide here. Or perhaps it's out of order. This is it. Here we go. So the next steps here are to look at this system, the information value chain, and the sort of stakeholder universe, and look at where those points of intersection are in the context of Calanus fisheries in the Norwegian Sea. This is a great early case because it's a small, well-bounded stakeholder system that has potentially big global ramifications at some point in the future, and because it's accessible, because you all are here. So as I said, outline the information value chain and the stakeholder landscape, and then just start to talk to people and say, here's what's happening with the data. explain to me if you see any issues with that. What is your reaction vis-a-vis trust? Oh, and after that, replicate that same approach in Antarctic krill fisheries, then compare across these two cases to really identify some pinch points that we see in common or that people are particularly concerned with, and develop interventions, by which I mean maybe we change the way that we communicate the data. Maybe we change our analytical strategy to explainable AI instead of using a black box approach, and test them. So put people in two groups. You all get the explainable AI. You all get the standard black box. Ask you before and after, what do you think? If the people who got the explainable AI say, no, I feel good about this, I completely trust the outcome of this analysis, and the people who got the black box say, well, then we've demonstrated that the explainable AI addresses this particular barrier to trust. And then it's a 3-year postdoc. This won't take 3 years, so we'll see what happens after that. That is indeed actually the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Wow, Kate. Wow, wow, wow. You gave us both knowledge and energy. Thank you. Any questions for Kate? Yeah, we got one.
Yes, thank you. Great presentations. I was thinking, you're saying here in this room there's a lot of researchers and some industry players, and we're supposed to find out what to do with the ocean, how to use it. But the politicians, as you mentioned, and you have this big data, is all this big data that you're saying that even the scientists doesn't know exactly how to use, will this be a hindrance for the politicians who are supposed to make decisions on what they feel is lacking of data? We're always going to be looking for more data, especially when it comes to development of the ocean. And I think Gruttum's point of water and all the land is used, we have to start using the ocean. And are they going to be able to make good political decisions, which means that the research is going to be done, turn into food production from the sea?
That is a fabulous question, and there's a lot to unpack there, but I will try to be brief. So there's two different things. There's good technical decisions, and there are good political decisions, and they are not always the same thing, right? This is one of the problems with the technocratic ideal, is this idea that a good technical decision is the same as a good political decision, but politicians have different things that they care about. And honestly, we can be cynical about that, but rightly so, because science is not the only thing that matters in decision making. You know, that's my 2 cents, waving my little policy researcher flag for you. So there's the question of to what extent do those two things overlap, which we'll treat separately. But then what your question really gets at is there's so much uncertainty and we still have so much to learn. What does the process look like of getting that translated into actual governance action and decision making? And that is something, when I talk about speaking with stakeholders in these interviews, I'm including politicians and political decision makers in that group. So I will, to the extent possible, be talking to people who are making and implementing the policies that sort of create the landscape that the fishery is operating in or that the research is being undertaken in, as well as private sector actors and researchers and so on and so forth. The short answer is that politicians are used to making information with making decisions with imperfect information. As a matter of fact, there is a huge disjoint between scientists' desire to nail every little thing to the floor, particularly in terms of uncertainty, and politicians who are like, please don't tell me any more about uncertainty. It just confuses me and it makes it impossible for me to talk to my constituents in a way where I can project confidence about my decisions, right? So a little bit more long-winded than I intended to be. That's always, there's always tension there, and that is something that I'll be exploring for sure.
Great, Kate. Anyone else? No? Round of applause. Awesome. All right, for the next speaker, we are trying something new. He couldn't be here in person in Trondheim, but fortunately, we are all used to see and listen to people talking from a screen after a couple of months with these corona restrictions. So the next person out will join us live from, somewhere else than here. Can you imagine? Hello, Fredrik. Can you see us?
Good morning.
Yeah,
I
there
can see
you
you.
are.
Can you hear me as well?
Yeah,
Good.
great. Fredrik Myhre is an advisor at the Verdens Naturfond, World Wildlife Fund, and we are very pleased to have him with us as a speaker today. Sorry to interrupt you there, Fredrik, but now the screen is yours.
No worries. Thanks. Good morning, everybody, and I hope you had a great day yesterday and also so far today. I was at least really enjoying the last two presentations. I've been listening into those, and again, of course, sorry for not being there in person, but my calendar didn't allow for that. So at this time, but I will be joining you from Oslo. Even though I should be on the water, right, like the picture in the screen behind me and in the presentation. But to kick off, I was given the title on sustainable exploitation of the oceans and what's the WWF's perspective on that. And just to frame it, I will dive into or use the broad brush to paint a picture before I go into the oceans, and that's, as you all know and are aware of, this is something that we have to have in the back of our minds when we do things with nature. We are, as you know, both in climate crisis and in nature crisis, and we have to solve both going forward. We have to make sure that all the decisions that we make both are linking up to the goals in the Paris Agreement, but also that they link up to the goals coming hopefully coming next year in what we call a Paris Agreement for the nature. And the background of course is also that we are in the middle of a sixth mass extinction of animal life on this planet. Looking into the numbers, we see that there's been a 68% drop in wildlife populations just since 1970. So the alarm bells in nature are really calling out for our help. And it's not just to help us help nature, but of course it's to help ourselves. And if we look into more details on the numbers for the oceans, as I said, it's 68% drop in the wildlife populations worldwide, if you look at the planet in general. But for the knowledge that we have for the marine population so far, we see that there's a 36% drop in the same time period. And of course, looking into how the world's fisheries are doing these days, we see that 93% of the commercial fish stocks either are fully exploited or overfished. As most of you know, I guess, is that 1/3 of the commercial fish stocks are already being overfished, and 60% is then fully exploited. I always get challenged, or I used to get challenged by the fishing industry on why do you use the numbers for the fully exploited ones, because that's maybe where we would like to be at, and that could be true for at least several of the stocks, but at least it gives the picture of if we are to harvest more from nature and more from the oceans, we have to do it in a different way, because there's simply not anywhere else anymore to harvest from in a traditional commercial way. And of course, looking into the stressors of the sea, these ones are quite well known for most of you, I guess, but we see that, of course, the temperature increase and ocean acidification is taking its toll on the ecosystems and stocks in the sea. We see that there's, as I said, problems with overfishing and also, of course, loss of habitats. And we also see that the sea is filling up with the pollution and plastic wastes. And looking into how we are managing our oceans, and then putting on some Norwegian glasses in this, here in Norway, we try to have, and also worldwide, we try to have ecosystem-based management, and we have it in writing at least. But even in commercial fisheries and commercial fisheries management, we see that there's a huge lack when it comes to the knowledge on how the different species to species interactions are, and also, of course, the species to habitat interactions. And without having that kind of in-depth knowledge, it's also difficult to say what the human impacts are, not just on species, but on the ecosystems in general. So there's a huge knowledge gap to fill there in the years to come. And relevant to this project, and also relevant for of course, especially research in a Norwegian context going forward is the Hurdalsplattformen, the new governmental platform for the new government that's just came into place. And I could talk long about that platform, but I will at least highlight one good thing that's in the platform, and that's that they want to really strengthen the research both on stocks and resources in the ocean, along the coast and inside the fjords. So you have it there in writing that this is something that the new government will put forward as one of the things they would like to see strengthened in the years to come. And of course, when we're talking about fisheries on new species, we need to increase, as I said, the knowledge on species and habitats, and especially we will have an increased demand for multiple species models. Even in Norwegian fisheries, where we would like to see ourselves as one of the front runners when it comes to knowledge on fisheries. Even in Norway, we don't have these multiple species models for the fisheries management, and this is something that's both are needed for already existing commercial species, but especially when we are looking towards new fisheries, and especially also fisheries going down in some in the low trophic levels, for instance, colonies. It's absolutely crucial that we have the knowledge on how the cascades effects possibly can be for the fisheries, for other species and also habitats. And in that, of course, it can also be bycatch problems, and then what kind of mitigation measures can we get in place in order to reduce bycatch problems that I identified along the way. Of course, one thing that's really going to be in even increased focus in the years to come is the climate footprint of the fisheries. Yes, so far you can say that seafood is one of the more climate friendlier food sources, but at the same time, going towards 2050, we know that all the different industries and activities that humans are doing are supposed to be at a zero climate footprint. So how can we already now start planning for trying to reach that kind of goal in the approach then for new fisheries also? And of course, we are absolutely depending on both transparency and traceability for new both existing and new fisheries, and especially in the debate on new fisheries, I think this is absolutely crucial in order to make sure that we do this do this right from the first place. And one thing is that you can look into also, of course, the certification of sustainability. I'm just brought up the Marine Stewardship Council, as you probably most of you know, it's one of the global certification schemes for wild-caught seafood. It could be other ones here as well, but this is the one that WWF at least recognized as the best one so far globally, but also looking into the possibilities for having the new fisheries also MSC certified, or at least sustainability certified for sustainability going forward, and then aim to have the best standards or the best certifications standards in place for the new fisheries. And of course, there's a lot of other things in the ocean than just fisheries. And one thing is that we have to make sure that areas that are already defined as vulnerable marine ecosystems are also evaluated in other contexts and aspects than just fisheries, that we have this overarching look to them. And just to bring up an example from the Norwegian Ocean areas again, you can see in the map and all the blue areas, those areas are already defined as vulnerable marine ecosystems, or særlig verdifulle og sårbare områder, SO, as we call them in Norwegian. And before going into new activities in such areas for WWF, we think it's important that these areas are also looked upon with the goggles through marine protection. We know that scientists are calling out that we need to protect more of the ocean systems going forward. They're calling out to 30% protection by 2030 in order to actually save what's left of the oceans. And in Norway so far, just to bring up Norway again, we have protected ±1% of our ocean areas so far. We should have been at 10% by 2020 in order to achieve the Aichi targets that we have been committed to, but we're so far at 1% marine protection. And of course, with new data and new information, and also some of these vulnerable marine ecosystems can change. And this new map that came up is the new suggested areas that you're probably aware of from the Institute of Marine Research and others that put this forward previously this fall. As you can see, the areas have increased quite significantly. They used to be 40% of the Norwegian ocean areas that identified as vulnerable marine ecosystems, and in the new maps and new suggestions, it will be increased up to 60% of the Norwegian ocean areas. So have that also in the back of the mind when you when we look at new possibilities for harvesting from the ocean. And of course, this with sharing data and results, especially sharing what's working, what's not working, so that people and other projects and especially other nations also can learn from mistakes done, but also get the information on the success that different projects have and different fisheries have. Share information and results, of course, in that. Try to establish a best practice for others to follow, or to also gain knowledge from other projects around the world that has success and failure in order to make sure that the fisheries that we are doing are always following the best practice. And of course, contribute to a stronger knowledge platform and better, ultimately then better management regimes. And I thought the previous speaker had some really good thinking around how to separate between that, or to highlight the fact that more data don't necessarily give better decisions, but at least more data will at least provide a better platform, a broader platform for decision making. And for the stakeholders like ourselves, it will provide us with more hopefully concrete advices from the research community that we can try to make sure that ends up as the political decisions, making sure that we are putting the oceans in a better place than it were in the first place. I think we used all my time, so I will try to stop sharing my screen again and look forward if there's some questions or comments. And again, thank you for having me, and super interesting to listening to the rest of the day.
Thank you, Fredrik. Yeah. Any questions for this man on the screen? No questions. We see you on a really big screen now, Fredrik. You're huge.
I can actually see myself as well.
Yeah, you do. It was nice to kind of get to know you. Thank you for being with us. Last round of applause. Yeah.